We are jumping straight into the 30 Years' War today, a conflict that was so big, so transformative, it basically invented the modern world of international politics.
It really did. We're talking 1618 to 1648, a full 3 decades that just gutted Central Europe and completely changed how nations deal with each other.
And when you dig into it, it wasn't just one fight, was it? It was more like three huge struggles all crashing into each other at once.
Exactly. You had, first, the bitter religious fights between Catholics and Protestants. Then you had these huge power struggles between Europe's royal families.
And the third piece.
The desire of local rulers, princes and dukes, to govern their own lands without the big emperor telling them what to do.
Okay, so let's set the scene. This all kicks off in the Holy Roman Empire at the start of the 1600s. And calling it an empire is maybe a little generous.
Oh, absolutely. It was more like a legal disaster. It was this fractured mess of hundreds of little states. Each one had its own ruler, its own laws, and a lot of them even had their own armies.
A total powder keg.
The ultimate powder keg. And you have Roman Catholics and Protestants living right next to each other, but with these deep, deep disagreements on, the most basic parts of their faith.
And on top of that, there's this rule, cuius regio, eius religio. Can you break that down?
Yeah, it's a Latin phrase that basically means whose realm their religion. So the local ruler, the prince, gets to decide the official religion for everybody in his territory.
Wow. So imagine you're just a regular person. You're forced to choose between your own beliefs and, losing your home or even your life.
That's the pressure. It's immense. So you've got these local princes all trying to grab more power for themselves, and the emperor is trying to hold it all together and enforce a single religion.
So any attempts at diplomacy before this were?
Pretty much a failure. Agreements were made and then just ignored. There was zero trust left, so any little spark was guaranteed to set the whole continent on fire.
Which brings us to the spark. The Defenestration of Prague in 1618. I mean, how does one local argument pull in all of Europe?
It's an incredible moment, really. You have these Protestant officials in Bohemia, which is part of the modern Czech Republic, and they are furious.
Furious about what? Specifically?
The Catholic king, Ferdinand II, was part of the super powerful Habsburg family, and he started rolling back their religious freedoms. He even stopped them from building new Protestant churches.
So they called a meeting at the castle in Prague.
They did, and it was not a polite meeting. The Protestant representatives confronted two of the king's top Catholic governors.
And this is where it gets wild.
It goes from a heated argument to a full-blown act of rebellion in seconds. They literally grab the two governors and their secretary and throw all three of them out of a high window.
I think the records say it was a 70-foot drop. 70 feet.
A very long way down. And somehow they all survived the fall.
Which, of course, both sides immediately used for propaganda.
Oh, absolutely. The Catholics claimed that angels had swooped down and caught the men, proving God was on their side.
And the Protestants?
The Protestants had let's say, a more practical explanation. They said the men just landed in a giant pile of manure and trash that had piled up in the moat.
So, angels or manure, the message was sent.
The message was crystal clear. This was a violent uprising against the Habsburgs, and that single act pulled everyone's allies into the fight, turning a local squabble into the start of the 30 Years' War.
So the emperor has to respond, and he does, pretty quickly.
Yes, with force. The first really big battle is the Battle of White Mountain in 1620, right near Prague.
And how did that go for the rebels?
It was a disaster for them. The Imperial army was way better organized, better trained. The whole battle was over in about 2 hours. The Bohemians were just crushed.
And the aftermath was brutal, I take it.
Swift and brutal. The emperor took back complete control, forced Catholicism on everyone, and executed the rebellion's leaders. It sent a clear signal to other Protestants. You can't win this alone.
So they start looking for outside help.
Desperately. And that's when other countries start getting involved. The first one to step in is King Christian IV of Denmark.
Now, he's Protestant, but this wasn't just about religion for him, was it?
Not at all. It was mostly politics. He was terrified that the Catholic emperor's power was growing so much that the Habsburgs would soon control all the important trade in Northern Europe and threaten his own kingdom.
But his intervention didn't go so well.
No, it was a strategic failure. The emperor's generals, guys like Tilly and Wallenstein, were just much, much better. They completely outmaneuvered the Danes.
So Denmark is forced out of the war.
Yep. Christian has to sign a peace treaty and promise to stay out of it, which leaves the German Protestants in an even worse position than before.
Okay, so the Protestant cause looks pretty hopeless. But then, in 1630, everything changes.
Everything changes. King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden enters the war. They called him the Lion of the North, and he was a genuine military genius.
What made him so effective? It wasn't just his leadership, right?
No, it was his innovations. This is what's really fascinating. He totally changed how armies fought. For one thing, he introduced mobile artillery.
You mean cannons that could actually move?
Exactly. Lightweight cannons that could be moved around the battlefield to support his infantry instead of being stuck in one place. It was a huge advantage.
And he changed his troop formations, too.
He did. Instead of those huge, thick squares of soldiers, he used thinner, more flexible lines. This meant way more of his soldiers could fire their muskets at the same time. The firepower was just overwhelming.
And his army was different.
Very different. They were disciplined, professional, and many of them were motivated by a really strong Protestant faith. And it worked.
The Battle of Breitenfeld.
That was the big one. The Swedes just shattered the supposedly invincible Imperial army. It proved they could be beaten and gave the whole Protestant cause a second life.
But then, tragically, Gustavus Adolphus is killed in battle only a couple of years later.
Yes, at the Battle of Lutzen, leading a cavalry charge himself. It was a massive blow, but his military system was so good that the Swedish army remained a major force for the rest of the war.
And his death sort of marks a shift in the war, doesn't it? It becomes less about these heroic religious leaders.
And much more about professional soldiers, mercenaries, men who were paid to fight for whoever had the most money.
Which brings us to Albrecht von Wallenstein. He's one of the most incredible figures of the whole war.
He really is an imperial general, but he was so wealthy that he basically ran his own private army.
How big of an army are we talking about?
Tens of thousands of soldiers. He used his own money to raise, equip, and supply them. He was a master of logistics. You could think of him as the world's first giant military contractor. He sold a ready-made army to the emperor.
And his counterpart on the Catholic League side was the Count of Tilly.
Right. And this reliance on private armies made the war incredibly unpredictable.
Because loyalty was for sale.
Completely. The records are full of stories of soldiers just switching sides if their pay was late or if another commander offered them a better deal. The war dragged on because, for these guys, war was a job.
This is the perfect moment for France to jump in. And this is where the war's motive shifts completely, from religion to pure politics.
It's the ultimate pivot. France, a very Catholic country, decides to support the Protestant side.
Which seems insane until you look at a map.
Exactly. France was surrounded by territory controlled by the Habsburg family, who ruled both Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. The Habsburgs were just too powerful.
And the man behind this policy was Cardinal Richelieu,
the French chief minister. He saw a strong, unified Habsburg Empire as the single biggest threat to France's security. It was a cold, hard calculation.
So France starts pumping money and eventually troops into the war to keep the Protestants fighting.
And that ensures the conflict grinds on for nearly another 20 years. French involvement is the moment it stops being about the Bible and becomes all about the balance of power in Europe.
And all this fighting, for decades, it must have changed the way war itself was fought.
Oh, massively. The weapons and tactics were evolving constantly.
What was the standard gear for a soldier?
The main weapon was a heavy musket, which was really slow to reload. So to protect the musketeers while they were reloading, they were guarded by these huge squares of soldiers holding 15-foot-long spears called pikes.
A holdover from the Middle Ages, really.
It was. And cannons were everywhere, mostly used for long sieges to break down city walls. But the real change was in organization.
The things Gustavus Adolphus started.
Exactly. Generals started using those thinner lines to maximize firepower. And it became all about coordination, getting your infantry, your cavalry, and your artillery to work together as one machine. This is really the beginning of modern professional armies.
While the generals are perfecting their strategies, what's happening to the civilians caught in the middle of all this?
It's a horror story. The civilians suffered more than anyone.
Why was it so bad?
It comes back to logistics. These huge mercenary armies had no supply lines. They were expected to live off the land.
Which is just a nice way of saying they stole everything.
Everything. They'd marched into a region and just take all the food, all the animals, all the supplies from the local people. They'd strip entire villages bare.
And that creates this horrible cycle.
A death spiral. They'd burn villages, so people were homeless. Farmers couldn't plant or harvest their crops, so you had constant widespread famine.
And disease.
Disease was the biggest killer of all. It spread through the armies and the starving civilian population like wildfire. Historians are very clear on this. Far, far more people died from hunger and sickness than were ever killed in a battle.
And numbers are just staggering.
They are. In some parts of Germany, it's estimated that more than half of the entire population died. Half. The level of destruction is hard to even comprehend. It would take generations to recover.
So after 30 years of this, everyone is just exhausted.
Completely bled dry, which finally leads them to the negotiating table. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648.
And this wasn't one simple treaty, was it?
No, it was a whole series of treaties, negotiated over years in 2 different cities. It was incredibly complex.
But its main achievement, its biggest idea, is something we still live with today. Sovereignty.
That's the key takeaway. The idea that each country, each state, has independent control over its own territory and its own internal affairs. Other countries don't get to meddle in your business.
It completely changes the game.
It ends the old model of the Holy Roman Empire. The treaties recognized all those little German states as mostly independent, they drew new borders, and they expanded religious freedom. This is the real birth of the modern system of independent nations.
But for Germany, the immediate aftermath was just ruin.
Total ruin, decades of recovery ahead. Farmland was abandoned, the population was a fraction of what it had been, and trade had collapsed. The emperor had almost no real power left, and Germany stayed a fragmented collection of territories for another 200 years.
So when we look back, what's the ultimate legacy of this war?
Well, first, it was the last major religious war in Western Europe. After this, wars are fought for land, for power, for resources, but not really for God. It shifts everything to secular national interests.
And the nation-state becomes the main player on the world stage.
Exactly. A country with clear borders and a central government. And leaders learned, or started to learn, that diplomacy and trying to maintain a balance of power might be better than constant, devastating warfare.
The 30 Years' War was just this brutal, bloody reset for the entire continent. It rewrote the map and the rules. It was the moment political power really, finally, took over from religion as the driving force in Europe.
And that leaves us with a really interesting question for you to think about. The Peace of Westphalia set up this new rule of sovereignty, but given how often powerful countries have ignored it ever since, was it a true legal principle, or was it just a truce signed by people who were simply too exhausted to keep fighting?
See you next time.